A disappointing season ends in disappointment. Tigers fall to Oklahoma. We'll recap it. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network on the face of planet Earth. LSU finishes 7-5 in the regular season after falling to Oklahoma 17-13, a game where, stop me if you've heard this from before, the defense played great, the offense was terrible, and LSU found a way late to lose a football game. It's what transpired against number 8 Oklahoma in Norman. And before I go any further, I'll talk a little bit about the game here. I do want to give a hat tip to Frank Wilson, because one of the things that is undeniable, despite the fact that as the interim head coach, LSU went 2-2, they lost road games to top 10 teams at Alabama and at Oklahoma. They won home games against really bad teams, Arkansas and Western Kentucky. This was a massively disappointing season. As disappointing a season as I can remember in my lifetime since 1998. That's the one I would comp it to. 1989 comes into mind as well. Maybe some older Tiger fans could remember some that would rival it. But 98 was a team that was preseason top 10. Jerry DiNardo's fourth team, Kevin Falk, Herb Tyler, Booger McFarland, Todd McClure, all seniors, and a lot of expectation as a preseason top 10 team. The defense was atrocious that year, a little bit of an inverse from this year where the offense was good and the defense was really bad. But that season, with Lou Tepper as the defensive coordinator, which for people of a certain age, that's a 4-letter word. But the drop linebacker and some of those jokes that have lasted several decades. But it was a massively disappointing season, and that's kind of how this one went as well. Preseason top 10, you get that win over Clemson after all of the talk about starting 1-0 and winning the big marquee opener, which they finally did, clearing that hurdle. LSU got all the way up to number 3 in the country. And if you had told me when LSU was leaving Clemson, South Carolina that day that this team would finish 7-5 unranked and Brian Kelly would be fired before November, I just couldn't have seen a realistic scenario where that would have been possible. But it is the reality. And as we record this here on Saturday night, we continue to wait on a final decision from Lane Kiffin on Kiffin Watch. So, and I've had plenty of that here, and we'll continue to follow that story as it moves all the way along. But I wanted to compliment Frank Wilson, because Frank Wilson inherited a miserable situation, and most of the time, if you're an interim head coach, you inherit a miserable situation. You're generally not. If you're an interim, it's because someone got fired or there was a bad situation that led to the head coach being out. And throughout the final month of this season, LSU didn't have a single opt-out. And remember, this was a team built primarily not of guys that were LSU signees that went through 3, 4, 5 years with LSU. This is a team built primarily of one-year mercenaries. When you go down the list on either side of the ball, I mean, guys like Braylon Moore and Josh Thompson, although Moore could come back. Bauer Sharp, Berrien Brown. You look at the defensive side with Jamari Butler, Jack Pyburn, Patrick Payton, Bernard Gooden, Mansour Delane, AJ Halsey. I mean, all these guys are one and done. They're one and done guys that came here to get a payday, but to try to win a championship. And it's just not going to work out that way, obviously. And any of those guys could have, understandably, left and gone to preserve their health and gone to get ready for the NFL draft, but all played. And I think that's a huge testament to Frank Wilson keeping this team together and the culture that they built. And I think Brian Kelly, although no one's going to want to acknowledge that, did build culture around the team with the type of athlete and type of player they brought in via the portal, guys that were bought into the culture and the season, the team. And they stuck it out and they played hard. That's an undeniable. Listen, some teams quit. This is a day where Kentucky got blown out by Louisville by 40. We saw Florida quit. We have seen teams in interim situations quit. No one can accuse this LSU team of quitting. The bottom line is they just weren't very good. If you didn't watch the game at all, You could look at the box score and it would tell you everything. You could look at LSU's drive chart. Like, this was LSU's drive chart of the game. Punt, interception, punt, field goal, punt, half, touchdown, punt, field goal, punt, turnover on downs. LSU in this ball game, and it wasn't just the punts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 3-and-outs. 7 3-and-outs in this ball game, and an interception on the first play of their second possession of the game after the interception that Harold Perkins nabbed and put LSU in business, first and goal at the 5, first down, interception thrown by Michael Van Buren. But that really tells you the story. I mean, we can go through the game flow. LSU got the ball. Oklahoma forces a 3-and-out. They muff the punt, managed to fall on it. But then Patrick Payton forces the deflected pass. Harold Perkins intercepts it, returns it to the Oklahoma 5-yard line. And this is one of those, when you look back at a 17-13 game and you get first and goal at the 5, you got to come away with points, and you didn't. On first down, beautiful play call by Alex Atkins. Bauer Sharp was open. Michael Van Buren just held on the ball too long. He had two options. He could have thrown it sooner to Bauer Sharp, thrown for a touchdown. He probably could have run to the pylon. It would have been a foot race, maybe scores. But either way, you got to protect the football. In any event, he throws an interception. And then after that, it was just 3-and-out punt by Oklahoma, 3-and-out punt by LSU. Oklahoma puts together a drive where they kick a field goal, 3-and-out punt by LSU. Oklahoma, in one of the most indefensible decisions that Brent Venables could have possibly made, went for it around midfield on a 4th and 1 when there was no shot at all day that LSU was going to put together a long, sustained scoring drive. He should have punted the football, pinned LSU inside the 20, would have forced another 3-and-out. Instead, turnover on downs, great effort. Bernard Gooden came up with the big stuff there. And LSU gets the ball around midfield and would convert a field goal there, a 25-yarder. So, I mean, that really was a gift right there. And then you went punt, turnover on downs. I mean, it was just a pretty terrible game all the way around. You went to half tied at 3. And the thing that did you in, unfortunately, defensively, was you gave up 2 big plays. You gave up a 45-yard touchdown, and while you're leading 13-10 after a field goal put you ahead, you gave up a 58-yard touchdown to lose 17-13. And really, that drive where you got down, it was in the fourth quarter. You get down to their 22-yard line. You fumble on the reverse. You lose 17 yards. You get a delay of games. You have a 3rd and 32, and you end up settling for a field goal. Par for the course for this team throughout the year. I don't know what to say other than this was a miserable offensive football game. I don't know that I can compliment a lot of things. There was some creativity. We did see Xavier Thomas throw a pass for 17 yards. We saw Jelani Watkins catch a pass that ultimately came off the board because of a penalty. But it just was a miserable day when Michael Van Buren goes 14 of 25 for 96 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. That kind of tells you the story of the day. 14 of 25 for 96 yards. You ran the ball 29 times for 85 yards, so you had good balance. You ran it 29 times. You threw it 26 times. So you showed good balance in your offense, but you were going against the best defense in the SEC, and you're just an inept offense. LSU was 2 of 14 on 3rd down, 0 for 1 on 4th down. That was the last play of the game where they had, offensively for LSU, where they had to go for it in a make-or-break situation. So 55 offensive snaps for LSU, only 198 yards. I mean, all of this is just abysmal, and there just isn't a good story to tell offensively. Trey'Dez Green had a nice reception on a 30-yarder in the second half, but that came after a really disappointing drop that he had out in the flat. At the end of the third quarter, heading into the fourth quarter, LSU had 118 yards of total offense, 83 rushing, 35 passing. It was just a day. It's just hard to say much other than you compliment the defense for the job that they did. Oklahoma put up 393, but as I mentioned, they did have a 58 and a 45-yard touchdown, so a third of their offense came on 2 plays. By and large, this defense played awesome. They came up with 3 interceptions of John Mateer that tied a season high for Mateer. So a great day for the LSU defense to go on the road to Norman, Oklahoma, where they had no support at all from their offense, to limit Oklahoma to just 17 points. It was a a really strong day for an LSU defense that has been really good all season long and just had to carry the mail for this entire team. And the offense just didn't complement them. Devon Keys had 8 tackles, a TFL, a forced fumble. A.J. Halsey had one of the interceptions, 7 tackles as well. Harold Perkins continued his outstanding play. He had 6 tackles, a quarterback hurry. He had the interception. It was one of those days, though, where you just needed something offensively, and you just couldn't get it. So the Tigers lose, and they turn the page to next year. So what might that look like? I'll give you a few thoughts on that as we continue here. Locked on LSU, your team every day. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift. And Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. The quality is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking easier. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. And we're brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I do want to give a hat tip also to Tyree Adams, who suffered that ankle injury against Vanderbilt on the road in Nashville, had the tightrope procedure. Again, a lost season where he could have packed it up and taken it to the offseason. Tyree Adams decided to get out there and play, and he played the entire game for LSU at left tackle. Also a hat tip to Whit Weeks. Whit Weeks, similar as we learned, had the fractured ankle, could have packed it in this season, didn't, fought to get back, had a really cool moment a week ago against Western Kentucky, where he played 14 snaps and got to be on the field with his 2 brothers. And in this game, Whit Weeks ended up playing 36 snaps for LSU. Again, the thought was that he had 14 snaps a week ago. Whit told us this week he wanted to play about 30. He ended up playing 36 defensive snaps for LSU of the 68 total defensive snaps. So played just about half of LSU's defensive snaps in this football game. So hat tip to those 2 guys who got out there and played. And also a hat tip to Mansour Delane. I mentioned this on my radio show. I think we talked about it here earlier as well, but Delane sat the game against Western Kentucky, and we learned before that game that he was dealing with an abdominal injury. And I found out on Monday as I was walking into LSU football operations for the Frank Wilson press conference, Mansour Delane's dad was walking out, and he stopped and we talked for a few minutes. And he disclosed to me that Mansour has battled that injury actually since fall camp, which makes it even more astonishing that he has played this entire season where he is a Thorpe Award finalist, one of the 3 finalists for the best defensive back in college football, and did so playing with that injury all season where he effectively just managed it medically. And he played all 68 defensive snaps in this game. So major hat tip. Look, all these guys that played so hard and battled through a lot of adversity this year. And I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that these are moral victories, but sometimes there are things that need to be commended, especially in an era where it's very individualistic, understandably, with portal and NIL and guys who opt out of bowl games. And, we saw Bosa years ago at Ohio State opt out of the entire season, just getting ready for the draft instead of coming back from injury. So these guys have that option, and instead, even in a season that was lost, went on the road in that environment and decided to get out there and give it a go for the old war school. So hat tip to all the guys that went out there and played really well. This is going to be such an interesting offseason for LSU as we await at this moment Lane Kiffin's decision. As I've said here on the channel, on Locked on LSU in many places, I do fully expect Lane Kiffin is going to be LSU's next football coach. I believe they have an agreement in place and have had for at least a week an agreement in place for Lane Kiffin to be the coach. It was just sweating it out until it became formal and official, and that still isn't formal and official until he signs. Depending on when you listen or watch this, it may well be, but here on Saturday evening, not yet formally signed as we await that decision. But it's going to be fascinating to watch a rebuild of this roster because I just went through some of those players that are going to be gone. I mean, just think about the defensive side. A.J. Halsey, he's out of eligibility. Mansour Delane's going to be off to the NFL draft. Whit Weeks has an interesting decision to make. I suspect he'll be back. Jamari Butler, Patrick Payton, Jack Pyburn, West Weeks, Bernard Gooden, Harold Perkins, Jacobian Guillory. All of these guys are going to be gone. You lose such a lion's share of this team. Offensively, Xavier Thomas is a senior. Josh Thompson's a senior. Obviously, Garrett Nussmeier unfortunately didn't get to play the last 3 games of the season as he battled that injury and sat out. But you look up and down the roster and you realize Bauer Sharp's another one. So many of these guys aren't going to be back. So it's going to be a very significant roster rebuild for Lane Kiffin and his staff when he comes into LSU, assuming they do get that deal across the finish line, as I suspect they will. But the single biggest question that Lane Kiffin, provided he gets the job and does take it, and they formalize this, it's going to be who's going to be the quarterback next year. Obviously, Garrett Nussmeier is out of eligibility. And there were a lot of people who, let me not say a lot. There was a segment of the LSU fan base that blamed the offensive struggles this season on Garrett Nussmeier. And the point that I made pretty consistently here is that Garrett Nussmeier, you can acknowledge, was part of the problem. But to suggest that he was the problem, I think that's all been debunked here over the last 3 games. You played Arkansas, which is the worst defense in the SEC, and scored 23 points. You played Western Kentucky, which is a bad defensive team in Conference USA, and you didn't score 20 on them. And you scored 13 points in that game. And then you go play Oklahoma in this football game on the road. Now, Oklahoma is a great defensive team, and you scored 13 in that ball game against Oklahoma. So as I look at it, very clearly, Garrett Nussmeier was not your issue, and Michael Van Buren's not the answer. I believe Van Buren has a skill set that there is some potential there. He's got a good arm. He has some mobility. The 23-yarder around right end on LSU's only touchdown drive of the game was a really nice run. That's a dimension that Garrett Nussmeier didn't offer you that Van Buren did. But to call Van Buren a dynamic runner is insincere. He's not that. He had negative rushing yard for the season a year ago at Mississippi State, and in this football game, Van Buren ran it 5 times for 33 yards. That includes the 23-yarder, which was a fantastic run. So he's at this point, it's fair to characterize him as an inaccurate passer. He can improve, but he is not that as of now. And, with Lane Kiffin very likely coming in, his immediate charge is going to be find a quarterback. And I don't know that you can definitively say that quarterback's on the roster. Van Buren, Colin Hurley's taken a leave. There's been a lot of questions about Trinidad Chambliss, and we can have that conversation down the road. But Chambliss has to go through an appeals process to get another year of eligibility. If he does, would he follow Lane Kiffin to Baton Rouge? Maybe. All that remains to be seen. But the most obvious part of this is LSU has got to go get quarterbacks to add to this roster for next year, because this offense will not go anywhere until you're better on the offensive line and you have a quarterback that can function within your offense. And the transfer portal allows it, and there will be opportunities. And if it is Lane Kiffin, just consider what he just did, spotting Trinidad Chambliss in Division II and saying, I like that guy's skill set. I can work with that. He's one of the great stories of this college football season. So that's going to be the top of the list. Now, if you get both Caden Durham and Harlem Berry back, you're going to have a really nice 1-2 punch at receiver. I think it is imperative that they get Braylon Moore to return. He does have another year of eligibility if he wants to come back and play center at LSU for another season, which would be awesome if they could. You're going to lose a lion's share of your production from the receivers. Barry and Brown, Aaron Anderson, Xavier Thomas will all be gone. Chris Hilton after this season. But the good news is the cupboard is hardly bare. Kyle Parker has the potential to be an outstanding receiver. Teron Francis, there's so much potential around him. They call him man-child. I'm not trying to give you a 2026 preview just yet, but suffice to say that Kiffin, his staff, provided they are the next coaching staff at LSU, will have a lot of work to do to rebuild. And unfortunately, that was on display Saturday in Norman, Oklahoma, where LSU couldn't even eclipse 200 yards of total offense, just 198 of total offense and 13 points for what is as bad an offense as we've seen in my time covering LSU. And boy, we saw some bad offenses in the Les Miles era. But optimism is bred if, in fact, you get the deal done with Lane Kiffin to come to Baton Rouge. So hat tip to Frank Wilson for the job that he did coaching LSU over these 4 games. We'll see. LSU is bowl eligible. As I was told this week, it's very likely either the Music City Bowl or the Gator Bowl for LSU. And so we'll see. I would assume Coach Frank Wilson would still be the coach in the bowl game. And we'll see who's available for the Tigers in that game. But one more game to go in this season before they wrap up a disappointing season. But optimism abounds in the future if, in fact, they're able to get the deal done with Lane Kiffin, as I suggest and submit that they will. So as that story continues to unfold, we'll follow it here. And thank you for being with us here every single day on Locked on LSU. Thanks for making us your first listen. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked on LSU. It's your team every day.